ورحمة الله.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء سيد الأصفياء إمام الأتقياء نبي محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. قال الله تعالى: وأنتم العالمون إن كنتم مؤمنين. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: الدين النصيحة. صدق الله مولانا العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم، ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين والشاكرين، والحمد لله رب العالمين. Ibn al-Arabi rahmatullahi alayhi, one of the most prolific authors and scholars, he writes and he says, he speaks about the mukh, the cerebrum, the brain. And he gives an example. He says the brain, it gives strength to the body. The brain, it gives strength to the limbs. We know very well that in medical terms, when they say a person is brain dead, perhaps his body has vital functions in it, but his brain is not supplying that power and energy to the rest of the limbs. So he's brain dead. He can't move. He can't function properly. So he gives a beautiful example. He says the brain is what gives strength and power to the body. He says so too is that same example of dua when it comes to the rest of ibadat. Allahu Akbar. He says dua is that mukh of ibadat. Dua is what gives that strength, that life, that soul to the rest of our worships. He says it strengthens the ibadat, strengthens the worship. Dua, it strengthens worship because it's the soul, it's the spirit of ibadat. So the question I ask all of us sitting here today: what's the status of our soul in ibadat? What's the status of the life, of our life when it comes to worship? Remember, dua is the life of ibadat. So ask yourself sitting here today: what's my status in ibadat? What's my status in soul in ibadat? When we want to understand the beauty of dua, the beauty of supplicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah, He gives many examples, and the best of examples are those that are the best to walk the face of the earth. We know them as the Anbiya, the Prophets alayhimu salatu wassalam. So look at the Prophet that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions most in the Quran. He mentions about Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Prophet Musa alayhi salam, there was a time when he was the lowest in his life. He was at the lowest point in his life. A Nabi of Allah. He was already a Nabi of Allah. And yet he was at the lowest point in his life. He was struck with so many afflictions. When we listen to this, we have to have empathy. When we listen to this and put yourself in his situation. So, what were just some of his afflictions? At a young age, he got separated from his own mother. Pharaoh, and his entire army, his entire police, they are looking for him. They are out to kill him. He is forced to leave the very same country that he grew up in. He's forced to run and to leave. He's starving. He did not have food for 7 days to eat. In fact, the commentators mentioned he was merely surviving on the leaves of trees. On the leaves of trees. How much can a person really survive on this? 7 days he didn't have a proper meal. He did not even have any na'al, any slippers. He was barefoot. He had no wealth of any kind. And whilst he was in this state, he says a powerful dua which Allah records in His holy book. Nabi Musa made a powerful dua in this state, at the lowest point of his life. He says, Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khayrin faqir. He says, my Lord, I am truly in desperate need of whatever good you can send down to me. Wow, what a dua. Khayr is used here. Khayr, for those who appreciate the Arabic language, is nakira, which means it's general. It means he's asking Allah, Allah, whatever form of goodness you send down to me, I'll appreciate. Whether it be in the form of food, whether it be in the form of wealth, whether it be in the form of strength, Allah, I have nothing. Allah, I am in desperate need of whatever you have to send down upon me. It was not long after this, after he was at the lowest point of his life, that Allah, He blessed him with a wife, a stable job, and a home. This is what he was blessed with shortly after he made this dua. Another one of the famous prophets, Nabi Zakaria alayhi salam, Allah says about him, Allah records the type of supplication he makes. Understand, Allah mentions these du'as in His holy book, in the Quran. Allah is mentioning it because it's beloved to Allah. Allah is mentioning it because through this, these people were able to achieve the bounties and favors of Allah. So in other words, Allah is telling us directly, oh my servants that are reading this, take heed of it, take note of it, and make your pattern like their pattern. So he records the pattern of his prophet Nabi Zakaria alayhi salam, and he says, إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ نِدَاءً خَفِيًّا. He says, Zakaria alayhi salam, he supplicated to his Lord. He made dua to his Lord, nida'an khafiyya, such a supplication that is silent, is quiet, is humble. And through this, the commentators mention that when you're supplicating to Allah, especially one-on-one, it's better to supplicate and beseech from Allah in a low voice, in a humble voice. You don't need to shout to the heavens. Supplicate to Allah sincerely, with a low and a humble voice. Zakaria alayhi salam, he's calling out to Allah in a humble manner, in a low tone, and he's acknowledging that Allah can grant him whatever he needs. And this is why the scholars, they mention a beautiful point from this, they elucidate a beautiful point, which is that when you're making dua to Allah, my beloved brothers and sisters, when you're making dua to Allah, they say, the same yaqeen, the same conviction you have in your heart, as though you were in the precincts of the Kaaba making dua to Allah, have that same conviction in Allah when you're making dua in the four corners of your room. Allahu Akbar. That same, when you're looking, those who have experienced it, you're in the precincts of the Kaaba, you're looking at the Kaaba, you're making dua to Allah, your conviction is at its highest. You say, have that same conviction when you're in the four corners of your room. It's the same Allah you're calling out. Have that same conviction. And do not ever despair. What was the manner of Nabi Zakaria alayhi salam, his dua? He woke up at the Tahajjud time, very quiet time. The Nabi of Allah, he says, most people are asleep at that time. You know that very well. It's a time when you connect to your Lord. Nabi Zakaria, he woke up at the Tahajjud time. And he woke up whilst his companions and his family members around him were asleep, of course. And he began to call out to Allah silently. And he began to say, Ya Rab, Ya Rab, Ya Rab, oh my Lord, oh my Lord, oh my Lord, acknowledging Allah. And for every time he called out, oh my Allah, Allah responded, Labbaik, Labbaik, Labbaik. And I said that I am here, I am present, I am here. So a lesson to learn from Nabi Zakaria alayhi salam, his form of dua, is before he asked Allah what he wanted, he expressed the situation. Allah also records this in his Quran. He expressed his situation, he expressed his weakness, he expressed his old age, and then he asked Allah for a child. Allah, you know, I'm in need of someone to continue my legacy. But oh Allah, I'm at a feeble age, I'm at a weak age. Allah, I'm very weak, I'm weak, I have nothing. He expressed the situation to Allah. In other words, he complained to Allah and Allah alone about his situation. Today, unfortunately, we complain to everyone else besides Allah. We complain to everyone else. Not that we shouldn't vent to people and seek their advice, but we complain to everyone, but we don't complain to the one who owns the heavens and the earth. We don't complain to the one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the owner, and for him is the treasures of the heavens and the earth. That's who we need to complain to first and foremost. So this is why the Mufassirun, they mention that when Nabi Zakaria alayhi salam did this, he did this, and because of this, because of complaining to Allah, who is expressing his desperate need before Allah in the court of Allah, this is why his dua was accepted, because he showed Allah, oh Allah, I am weak, Allah, I have inadequacy, Allah, I am really in need of you. And this is why Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, one of the famous companions of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he narrated the most hadith, the most narrations. Abu Hurairah, he says a very powerful statement, which is recorded. He says, Man ruziqa du'a lam yuhram al-ijaba. Whoever Allah he blesses with dua, he uses the word ruziqa, comes from the word rizq, sustenance. In other words, he's saying, part of sustenance, part of rizq, that Allah gives you the ability to make dua. If you can't remember when last you raised your hands to Allah, If you can't remember when last you had that conversation with Allah and you raise your hand alone, and my brothers and sisters, we are in some serious trouble. So he says, the one who Allah has blessed with rizq, sustenance, in the form of dua, لَمْ يَحْرَمِ الْإِجَابَةِ, he will never be deprived. Haram, he will never be deprived of Allah answering. When it comes to dua, my beloved brothers and sisters, it's a very special ibadah, a very special type of worship. And the reason for that is because it's unrestricted. I'll give you an example, because for salah, to pray, we need to be in the form of taharat, we need to have wudu, we need to have a pure form. And even throughout the days, there are certain points throughout the day that it's haram to pray salah, which we know, the 3 times that it's haram to pray salah. When it comes to fasting as well, a great form of ibadat. But even for some days during the year, it's also impermissible to fast as well. When it comes to tawaf, one of the greatest form of ibadah, tawaf at the Kaaba, it's also restricted to only in that specific place in Makkah. But you see, when it comes to dua, there's no prerequisite. There's no prerequisite needed for dua. There is no time that making dua is impermissible. Dua is unrestricted. In other words, Allah gives you an open form of ibadah. Make it at any time. In the state of purity, in the state of impurity. Day and night, call out to me. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. Whether you're sitting, whether you're walking, whether you're lying down, whether you're driving. Remember this, most importantly. Dua is like a conversation with your Lord as well. Some people, they say the only time I have to make dua and supplicate to Allah is when I'm commuting to my work. It's a beautiful time perhaps, because perhaps that's the only time for the day you're alone. It's not necessary that you raise your hands in dua while you're driving. But you're driving and you're focusing and your mind and heart is focused and you're just having a conversation with Allah. You're just talking to Allah, you're expressing your need before Allah, you're begging Allah, you're showing your weakness before Allah, your need before Allah. That's the time, remember this. Many people today, they talk about Allah. You ask them, they can give long speeches and talk about Allah. How many people today talk to Allah? So, it's enough time that, alhamdulillah, we speak so much about Allah. Excellent. Time to start talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever our needs are, this is one of the beauty of du'as, supplicating to Allah. Many of us, in fact, I would say every single one of us sitting here today, we have some need before Allah. Perhaps your need may be different from my need, and vice versa. Some of us, we are in financial need. Some of us, we have family problems. Some of us, we have health problems. Some of us, we have spiritual problems. We feel as though our iman is low. Whatever your need is, converse with Allah, talk to Allah, and beg from Allah. Remember this, and it's something important for us to take home today. The scholars, they mention there's only one pillar when it comes to dua. One pillar. You know, for those of you who pray salah often, you know there's many pillars of salah. Without it, your salah is invalid, etc. Fasting as well, zakat as well. But they say for dua, it's really only one pillar. And they mention hudur al-qalb, which means just make sure when you're talking to Allah, your heart is present. Not that you're speaking to Allah, but your mind is thinking some way far away. No, they say when you're conversing with Allah, speak to Allah and make sure your heart is present. You know whom you are begging from. You recognize that you are begging from Allah, the one who is in charge of everything, the one who created us, the one who will resurrect us, the one who we will stand before, the one who will determine our final place of abode. That's the one you are speaking to, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many people today in today's life, when you beg from people or you ask continuously from people, you realize people begin to avoid you. It's human nature. You're always asking a brother for something, always begging a sister for something. You ask every time you say you want something, they will eventually start to avoid you and they may even become upset with you. This is intrinsic human nature. But you know what's so amazing about the quality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that the more we beg and we ask from Him is the more He loves us. Allah. The more we beg from Allah is the more Allah loves us. He's not like us that the more we beg from people they turn away from us and become upset. No. In fact, the prophetic narration of Rasulullah says, "Man lam yas'alillah yaghdab alayhi." That individual who does not beg from Allah, Allah becomes upset with him. Wow! Imagine Allah is saying, "You don't ask for me, you don't supplicate to me, I'm going to be upset with you." Amazing quality. Allah is just waiting for us to beg and to ask from Him. And when we ask from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as I mentioned, we show show our total dependency upon Him. And you know when is a good time to show this as well? When we're at a comfortable stage in life. Comfortable. Don't let it be that the only time you raise your hands to Allah is when you're in a difficult situation in your life. But you see, when you're enjoying life's luxuries, I should say, you're enjoying the comfort of life, you're enjoying the boons and blessings from Allah. And really, if we were to truly introspect in our lives, you will realize that how much Allah has blessed us. This is why the scholars have written in their books that they say that the way we enjoy life today, when you look at it from centuries ago, it's like the lives of princes and kings. And really, when I look at it in history as well, how we enjoy life today, really even at that time, only the elite would enjoy life like that. So I'm just saying Allah has blessed us in so many different ways, and sometimes النعمة إذا فقدت عرفت. It's a famous Arabic saying, the only time you value a favor is when it's taken from you. The only time you truly value something is when it's taken from you. So this is why the hadith, it says, the hadith of our teacher, our master, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, says, ليس شيء أكرم على الله من الدعاء في الرخاء. Says there is nothing more honorable in the sight of Allah. Look at these words, these prophetic words. There is nothing that is more honorable in the court of Allah than that dua which is made in times of ease, in times of comfort, in times of prosperity. Why? Because the hadith also mentions that whoever would like for Allah to answer his prayers and supplications in times of hardship, then let him make dua in times of ease. This is a maxim for us to live by. If you wish for Allah to answer your dua when you're calling upon Him, when you're in a difficult situation, Nabi of Allah says, start making dua when you're also enjoying ease and comfort as well. Sometimes really I want to say, Allah, I'm thanking you. Allah, I thank you so. When last did we say, Allah, thank you for the blessings and bounties that you have given to us? When it comes to dua as well, I'll end off by mentioning this, that not a single dua it goes rejected. Not a single dua it goes rejected. Because we are taught that when we make dua and supplicate to Allah sincerely, either one of three things happen. And we probably did this so many times, so I'll mention it very briefly. One is that the dua is accepted just as we ask for. Just as we ask for what we want, Allah gives it to us. The second is that a calamity is removed that was about to afflict us. We don't know sometimes what calamity, what disaster is awaiting us or was awaiting us. And perhaps some dua we made at some point in our life, and through that dua, Allah removed the calamity that was waiting for us just outside our homes, just outside the masjid, just outside our place of work. Allah removed it through a dua. That's the second thing that can happen. And the third is that that dua will be saved for him and stored as part of his treasures. As part of his treasures on the day of Qiyamah, on the day of resurrection. And in fact, when he sees how much reward is awaiting him, what treasures are waiting for him on the day of Qiyamah, you know what he will say? You know what this individual, this brother or sister will say when they see this waiting? They say, I wish that none of my du'as were accepted at the face of the earth. When they see what's awaiting them. So du'as are always accepted. Let's follow the pattern of our Prophet ﷺ. You know, Nabi Allah taught us something amazing. When he's a morning du'a, before he ate, eating du'a. After he ate, there was a du'a. Whilst walking, he was a specific du'a. Before entering the washroom, there was a specific du'a. Before sleeping, Allahumma qini yawma tub'atu ibadah. Oh Allah, He will make a specific du'a. Oh Allah, protect me from the punishment on the day of Qiyamah. There are so many du'as. The Nabi of Allah revolved his life around du'a. That's why his wife used to say he was always in a constant state of du'a. And you know, it's good that we learn the prophetic du'as as well. Because prophetic du'as carry special virtues and special merit. If you look at the life of Rasulullah ﷺ, at every point in his life, there was a special du'a. In every part of the day, in every part of the night. Something you are doing, whatever you are doing, just know that there is a specific du'a for that something that you are doing. It's just time to learn it and to implement it. What was the positive consequence of this? When Nabi of Allah made his entire life a dua, on his deathbed, before he died, he also made a dua, Allahumma gfirli warhamni walhiqni birrafiq al-a'la. This beloved wife Aisha says, this was the last words of our Prophet ﷺ. Before that, the angel took his soul, he says, Oh Allah, forgive me, have mercy upon me, وَأَلْحِقْنِي بِالرَّفِيقِ الْأَعْلَى, and connect me to the highest companion. In other words, oh Allah, connect me to you. Why was he able to say this? One of the reasons why is because throughout his entire life he was making dua. Day and night he was making dua. My beloved brothers and sisters, if we implement this, and who is to say through mercy of Allah on our deathbed, our last word will also be this as well. Can you imagine this being your very last word? But it starts off somewhere, and that somewhere it starts off is from here, which is to inculcate dua and supplication throughout our entire life. When Umar radiallahu ta'ala, the famous companion, Umar radiallahu ta'ala was going for Umrah, what were the words, the last words the Prophet ﷺ said to him? He says, "La tansana ya ukhay." He could have called him akhi, in Arabic which means brother, but he called him ukhay. It means my beloved brother, my little brother. Imagine Nabi Allah saying this to you. Can you imagine how elated Umar radiallahu ta'ala felt? Can you imagine how happy he felt hearing these words? Nabi Allah saying, my little brother. Oh my beloved brother, I want to tell you something. لا تنسانا يا أخي من دعائي. When you go for Umrah, please don't forget us in your du'as. Wow. Even the Nabi of Allah is requesting, make dua for us as well. Make dua for us as well. Shows the importance and significance of dua. As I end off, my beloved brothers and sisters, I'll leave you with this one proverb, this famous statement for us to take home and to implement. We know today is the best day of the week, the Eid of the week, as the Muharam always reminds us every time. Today is the blessed day of Friday. And they mention that Friday is a gift from Allah. Especially that last part in the Friday, just before the Maghrib comes to an end, that last hour that after Asr between Maghrib that time, that's a special gift from Allah. That's a time where the narrations mention that your du'as are readily accepted. That's a special time to supplicate before Allah. So I remind every single one of us that Friday, today, is a gift from Allah. Do not send back the gift on Allah. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.